In Order 36, agus Morris Connacht, Moshe the Helen, Shrinta Amma, Aquinol, I shocked the David Cullinane, Karen Omid.
More than 2 years ago, 18 distraught families learned that their children's organs were sent to Belgium for incineration without their knowledge or consent. The South-Southwest Hospital Group was to complete and publish a report on the incidents at Cork University Maternity Hospital with the involvement of the affected families. In September 2020, the Minister for Health encouraged families to participate in the review. He stated that, and I quote, "The hospital group has committed to completing it by early November." It was not even commenced until April the next year and promised again for November last year. Yet another November later and there is still no final report. A commitment was given that the families would get a draft copy of the report. They were promised a draft copy of the report by the end of September at the latest, but this morning we learned that these families have been locked out of the process and that they will not get a first look at the report. That is shameful. Sparked by that incident, an audit of organ retention and disposal practices was commissioned by the HSE, as you know, Taoiseach. That report examined multiple hospitals, yet was completed far in advance of the report into Cork Maternity Hospital. It found that similar unethical practices were taking place in Limerick, Drogheda, Galway, Tullamore, Portunkla and Crumlin. But worst of all, it found that a single consultant named by RTE Investigates earlier this year, but known as Consultant A, was responsible for a significant amount of this malpractice. This is made worse by the fact that Consultant A had previously been removed from his duties at the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin in 2007. At some point, the HSE recommissioned Consultant A's services. In the 13 years since that report, published in 2009, government after government have promised and failed to legislate. The devastating consequences of this failure on parents and families should be obvious to us all. Last July, the Taoiseach in this House, responding to Chocta MacDonald, made 3 commitments to the families affected by these failures. First, that the bereaved families affected by the scandal at Cork Maternity Hospital would be given access to the report without further delay. That has not happened. Second, that the HSE audit would be published. That was delayed by 6 months and had to be forced out of the system under a Freedom of Information request. And third, that your government would publish the Human Tissues Bill this autumn. That has not happened either. Taoiseach, I have 3 clear questions for you. Will you compel the HSE to give the families access to that report this week? They have been calling for this for years. They have been promised it time and again, and we cannot continue to fail them. Who is responsible for governance failures leading to Consultant A's rehiring? Who is responsible for auditing his practice? And what accountability will there be for that failure? And lastly, Taoiseach, will your government finally publish the Human Tissues Bill this month without delay to prevent these incidents from happening again?
Much. I just want to thank Deputy Cullinane for raising this very sensitive matter and for his ongoing interest in it on behalf of the 18 families that are affected. The matter has been discussed in the House before, as the Deputy recognised, and I just want to once again express my deep sympathy to the families in Cork who've experienced the tragedy of losing a child and then had the devastating experience of learning that the organs of their child were disposed of without their consent, and that was wrong. It's hard to fathom the hurt that this incident must have caused the families affected. It is an extremely distressing situation that should not have occurred, and it's only added to their distress and grief. While it's not appropriate for me to comment on individual cases, I want to recognise the families affected for sharing their deeply personal stories so that other families don't have to go through what they experienced. The Department of Health is advised that the HSE, the South-Southwest Hospital Group, Cork University Hospital and Cork University Maternity Hospital have apologised to the families concerned and very much regret the incident. The Minister for Health, the Department of Health and the HSE are committed to ensuring that there is learning across the health service to prevent a recurrence. And the HSE advises that the systems analysis review being undertaken by the hospital group has concluded and the final report is being prepared. And we will respond to any recommendations. The HSE advises that the report is currently being finalised and will be shared with the families in the coming weeks. I'm not sure, Deputy, if we have powers of compellability in that regard, but we are assured by the HSE that the report will be shared with the families within the next few weeks. I understand the delay in the completion of this review has been very upsetting, but it's essential that correct processes are followed to ensure the facts of the case can be established and shared with the families affected. In relation to the Human Tissue Bill, dignity and respect for parents who have experienced the loss of a child is of paramount importance, and the Human Tissue Bill is on the priority list of legislation for government. The bill will introduce a regulatory regime for the conduct of post-mortems in hospital settings. Given recent events, the draft scheme of the bill has had to be amended to encompass certain aspects of the coronial post-mortem activities. The draft bill is now being finalised, and it's intended that it will be brought to government for approval at the end of this month.
Well, Taoiseach, I have to put it to you first of all that the delays from government and the HSE over the last 2 years on this issue has caused huge hurt and distress for the families involved, and it is simply not good enough. And I have to say that my experience of meeting some of those families is that they believe they are being stonewalled. So when you say that they will get sight of the report in a couple of weeks' time, similar promises were made in the past. What they were promised was that they would get sight of the draft report, and that is being reneged on. And it's really important that if you say in this House today that in a few weeks' time the families will get sight of the final report, that needs to happen. But I also have to put it to you, Taoiseach, that 13 years on from the 2009 review, and Britain and other countries having put in place similar bills to the Human Tissue Bill that we're still waiting on, there can be no excuse for that delay. You're saying again, and we've got previous commitments, only a few months ago in this House by the Taoiseach, that it would be the autumn. You're now saying by the end of the year. That needs to happen, and the promises made today by you in this chamber need to be followed through.
Thanks, Deputy. The delays in these inquiries, and indeed many other inquiries, are impossible to defend, and I can only imagine the frustration that people experience when these inquiries, which you think will last 6 months, go on for 6 months, a year, 2 years. It's very, very hard to defend. When we challenge people carrying out inquiries as to why this is the case, they often say that it was more complicated than they thought in the first instance, that things came up that they had to look into, but it's very, very difficult to defend from any point of view, quite frankly. I understand that the draft report is the final report, that they are essentially the same thing, but I could be incorrect about that. And I am told that it will be shared with the families in the next few weeks. But I appreciate they're not going to believe that until it actually happens, given their previous experience. And once again, I'm informed that we will have the Human Tissue Bill at Cabinet by the end of November. But it is long overdue. I think the proposal to have this bill may even go back as far as the Madden Commission under Minister Harney. It is that long ago, and it is well overdue. We need to get it done.